You are listening to an American Free Press podcast. Joining me on the line is Kelly McMillan, the Director of Operations for the McMillan Group in Phoenix, Arizona. Kelly, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Kelly, there's a lot of stories about your company and Bank of America being involved in somewhat of a dispute. I want to get to that in a minute, but before we do, for the benefit of listeners, can you give them a little bit of background about who you are and what is McMillan Group?
Okay. McMillan Fiberglass Stocks was founded in 1973 by my father, Gail McMillan. I joined him in the company in 1975, and at the time it was just my father, my mother, and I. We've expanded since then to employ over 60 employees. We're in a 15,000 square foot facility, and we manufacture about 10,000 stocks a year, mostly for individuals, some for OEM, for the major manufacturers. But a great deal of our business in the stock company is one-on-one with individual gun fanatics that really appreciate high-quality, accurate rifles, so they buy our stocks to help them achieve that goal. The other company that's under the McMillan umbrella is McMillan Firearms Manufacturing. The rifle company was actually started by my brother and I in 1992. It was first called McMillan Brothers Rifle Company, and we did that to separate it from an old company that my father had owned and sold. And so in 1992, we started McMillan Brothers Rifle Company. We're making custom rifles, building our own receivers, doing most of our own manufacturing in my brother's machine shop, McMillan Machine, which is not part of the McMillan Group umbrella, but they still do 99% of all of our machining for us. So we've been in the rifle business since 1992, effectively. In 2007, I bought my brother out. He was tired of the rifle business, and I told him I would take it over, and so I bought him out, and we moved the rifle company from his bank to my bank, which was, at the time, Bank of America. And we had established a relationship with them in 1998 with the stock company. So effectively, I've banked with them for almost 14 years, and then the rifle company had been banking with them since late 2007. So that's the history of both of the companies that we're talking about, and a little bit about our relationship with Bank of America.
Okay, thank you. And for the benefit of listeners who might not be up on guns and gun parts, can you let them know when you say stock, what do you exactly mean?
Well, for those who are not real gun aficionados, I explain it as the part of a rifle that is normally made out of wood. We make that out of fiberglass. In addition, we make bolt-action rifles for all kinds of applications, but we have a very large bolt-action rifle for the hunting sector, but we also do a lot of military and law enforcement business with the bolt-action rifles for highly accurate long-range rifles in need of some of the law enforcement and military today.
Like snipers, I guess?
Yes, we call them tactical rifles. That seems to be the most politically correct, but yes, you hit the nail right on the head.
Okay. Now, speaking of politically correct, why don't you then run through what happened? When did this happen with Bank of America, where they asked you to not be a customer anymore?
Well, early in April, Bank of America had called and said they'd like to set up our annual account analysis meeting. So we scheduled it for April 19th. When the appointment came time to happen, Mr. Ray Fox, who was a senior vice president of Bank of America, came along to the meeting with our account rep. And I was really surprised because I had never met a senior vice president before. In all the years I had done business with him,
Right.
They never felt it necessary to bring anyone but the business banker that we deal with and my account rep. So it was a surprise right off the bat that Mr. Ray Fox showed up, and I was a little concerned even before we started the meeting that there was something more going on here than what they had initially scheduled the meeting for.
Right.
What he said to me when we started the conversation right off the bat, he starts talking about having taken a look at my business and noticed that over the last 5 years we have become more of a firearms manufacturer and less involved in the accessory business as we had been. And right off the bat, that was inaccurate. I knew he didn't know my business very well because, like I said, we had been banking with them under the business name, McMillan Firearms Manufacturing. I don't know how anyone could misunderstand that, but if they didn't know that we manufactured firearms when looking at my account, they just weren't paying attention.
Right.
In any event, he started to talk about how now we make sniper rifles and hunting rifles, and he had just a little bit of a derogatory tone when he said that. And that's when I interrupted him and said, "Let me save you some breath." what you're going to tell me is that Bank of America no longer wants to do business with McMillan because we manufacture firearms. And he said, that's correct. He said, Bank of America has to assess the risk of doing business with a firearms manufacturer as it relates to our public reputation. And I didn't really understand what that meant, but I said, so you're telling me this is a political decision? He said, yes, it is. Now, when I said political, I meant intra-Bank of America politics. I didn't necessarily mean Democrat-Republican, but it was a decision based on something other than my ability to pay loans and whether I was a good customer or not. And when he affirmed that, it convinced me that this was a decision that was made because we were in the firearms business.
This was April 19th, you said?
That's correct.
Roughly about 2 months ago, this happened, and I saw on your Facebook page on June 16th, you say that today was a big day. We actually started closing accounts at Bank of America. So it's not just like you go in there and like a normal person would go in and just close their one account. You have to settle a bunch of stuff, right? Because you really had a big relationship with Bank of America.
Right. We actually had either 9 or 10 accounts with them, including our personal accounts. But the most important thing, what was difficult for us, is that we had basically 2 different companies running payroll through Bank of America and 75 employees that depended on getting their paychecks on a regular basis. So it was not as easy as just walking in and say, I'm done, and give me my money and go on to the next account. Besides, you have all of that residual deposits coming in and going out through your merchant services. And so it took us some time, and they were gracious enough to give me basically until September 1st to get the deal done, and that just happened to be when one of my lines of credit was up for renewal. So that was our intent, was to get out as fast as we could, and basically that's what I told Mr. Fox. I said, don't worry, it won't take us 6 months to get out. We'll find a bank who wants our business and is Second Amendment friendly right away. I'm sure we'll have no trouble. That is actually the fact. We had solicitations from a dozen different banks that said, we want your business, but we chose a local neighborhood bank that is part of the Zion Group, which means that they're well-funded, well-backed, weren't a part of the bailout, which was important to us.
Right.
Very Second Amendment friendly. Their CEO and a lot of their high-up corporate officers are staunch Second Amendment rights advocates and hunters. So once we met with them and we felt comfortable that they were not just Second Amendment friendly, but Second Amendment positive, we knew that was the right thing to do.
Right.
I do want to tell you just briefly,
Please.
I had a second meeting with Bank of America. Benito C. Almanza, who is the state president of Arizona for Bank of America, called me and set up an appointment for the following Tuesday. By the time Monday rolled around and this had been posted on Facebook and we were getting some nationwide response from people who were irate about a company making decisions about doing business with people strictly because they're in the firearms industry, it enraged a lot of people. And by Tuesday, it was a big enough deal for Mr. Fox's boss to schedule an appointment to come see me.
Right.
The first thing I asked him when he walked into the room is, do you mind if I record the conversation? Because looking back on my meeting with Mr. Fox, I would have loved to have had it recorded.
Sure.
I would have asked more questions had I known what was going down and been prepared, and I would have asked for stuff in writing. And I would have also asked, where did this decision come from? Because I want to talk to the man who made it. And so all of those things I was going to prepare myself for by recording the conversation with Mr. Almanza. Well, he told me he didn't want me to record it. And I was kind of surprised, asked him again, are you sure you don't want me to record this? And he said, yes. And I asked him why, and he said he just wanted it to be a friendly conversation between he and I. And so right at that point, I had already made up my mind that probably nothing he was going to tell me was going to be truthful or accurate, because if it had been, he would not have had a problem of having the conversation recorded. Basically, he told me we were bad credit risks and that he was afraid that we were going to go out of business and leave them on the hook for the lines of credit that we had. But you must understand, I've never bounced a check. I've never missed a payment on the credit line. At the time he came to see me, the $200,000 credit line that he had extended to us just 6 months earlier, the balance was zero. So what he said didn't make sense to me, even looking at it from the standpoint of a customer talking to a banker. If I truly were in some sort of trouble and with 9 accounts and as much business as I've given him over the years, he would have suggested some ways that I could remain a customer and get my, what he termed as credit risk under control. But he didn't do that. I even asked him, I said, so are you telling me I can still bank at Bank of America? And he said, no, we want you to find another bank, but this is why. So at the end of the conversation, I asked him, I said, since Mr. Fox's version of why you want me to leave Bank of America and your version is so far apart, heart that there could not be any confusion, misunderstanding. I said, who should I believe? Because one of you is lying. And he says, well, I don't know what Mr. Fox told you, but I know what I'm telling you is the truth. Well, if I were the state president for the Bank of Arizona and my direct subordinate had a meeting with the company that caused the kind of firestorm that this had, I would know exactly what he had said before I set up a meeting with the person. That was just another indication to me that they were just basically doing damage control at this point.
Or he was playing golf that day and he really didn't care.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah. I think Mr. Fox was an honest man. I think he did not expect me to ask the questions that I asked. I think he thought he could walk in there, basically tell me that the Bank of America wants us to find another bank and move our accounts, and that I would say okay, and that I would do that. I don't really think he ever expected to tell me exactly why, but when I asked the question, I think he felt compelled to be honest. I think this is kind of indicated by the fact that I've had hundreds of people ask me for his contact information because he gave me his card, and each one of them, when I gave it to him, I asked them to please, if you speak to Mr. Fox, get back to me and let me know what he says. Well, I am not aware of anybody since this incident having been able to reach Mr. Fox either by email or telephone, so he's just not going to talk about it.
Right, or they got rid of him.
No, I think he's still at the bank. Last I heard, because I know someone who worked for Merrill Lynch, he had actually given a presentation to the Merrill Lynch office that this associate that I know worked at. So within 3 weeks of the time this happened, he was at least still employed.
Bank of America made money off of McMillan Group.
Absolutely.
So they gave up a guaranteed source of income for what? What do you think motivated them to do it behind the scenes?
You know, I have absolutely no idea. Their defense throughout this whole thing has been that we do not have a corporate policy against doing business with firearms manufacturers. They named the Freedom Group as an example. They had just done a $50 million deal with the Freedom Group, which is a large conglomerate of firearms manufacturing companies. They talk about how they work with the military and law enforcement, and that's all well and good, and I understand that. I've never spoken about what their policies are. I don't know what they are. I don't work for Bank of America, and I've never asked anyone who could give me a copy of Bank of America's policies. So they're defending this by answering a question that nobody's asking. It's not that you have a policy against this. Is it, did you go to McMillan and ask them to find another bank? That's really all I've ever talked about because that's all I know. So what their reasoning was, I have no idea. I have heard that Mr. Almanza is a staunch Democrat and has political aspirations in the Arizona politics, and that may have been a motivating factor, but I don't know. That was just something that was suggested to me, and I don't know whether that's accurate or not.
Mm-hmm. So it could be something as local as that. It could just be a local decision. Or it could be something bigger because, like you said, they're dealing with the Freedom Group. I think they have Smith & Wesson among other companies.
Well, actually, it's Remington, Barnes, Bushmaster, DPMS. There's about 12 or 13 companies that are involved in that. But what I will say is that I have talked to many people who have had similar experiences with Bank of America, especially as it relates to having merchant services done. Now, Bank of America handled my merchant services for all of the time that I banked with them. And just a month prior, we had switched to a different merchant services that gave us better rates. And as most company owners do when they're in times of trouble, they look to find every dollar that they can that they don't have to spend. So that's why we changed. It had nothing to do with our relationship with Bank of America. But I know several people who have applied for credit card processing merchant services with them who have been denied because they're doing firearms transactions. And that is not just a Bank of America thing. There are many merchant services out there who will not process firearms-related transactions. So I think it's becoming a more prevalent way of getting control of and taking control of what we Americans do with our Second Amendment rights.
Right. And for the benefit of the listeners, just define merchant services.
We have to have a company that will actually process purchases made by our customers where they pay with a credit card.
Okay.
There are companies who actually process these transactions, deposit the money into our account, and then get paid for them from the customer's credit card. So that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. So they're like a middleman.
Sure.
Did you make a decision not to accept then Bank of America credit cards?
That was the first thing I thought of. I was upset. I was typing out this thing so I could post it on my Facebook. You know, this all started just because I was angry about the whole situation and not even angry about having to find a new bank, though it's a real pain in the butt, but it didn't hurt my feelings. You know, one of the things that I've learned since this thing happened is people's impression of Bank of America is really, really bad as a whole. Hundreds of people have said, I can't believe you were banking with him in the first place. And they mention things like the $5 transaction fee on debit cards and issuing illegal aliens credit cards and some of the decisions that they've made in the past that have not been customer friendly or even in some cases what people term to be America friendly. I kind of am embarrassed a little bit to say, I had a great relationship with them for 14 years until they decided they didn't want my business anymore.
Yeah, and I have to say that I bank with Bank of America. By default, I was at a bank that they took over, and I personally haven't had any problem with them. So I guess it depends on the individual, but it seems like more people rather than less have an issue with Bank of America.
Well, one of the things that I want to make clear is that this is not about McMillan. It's not about money. It's about our Second Amendment rights as Americans to keep and bear arms and how this is perceived as just another attempt by the people who would have more gun control to get around the fact that they can't legislate guns or our Second Amendment rights out of existence, but what they're trying to do is make it more and more difficult for us to be able to own and maintain, and whether or not they expected me to go out of business because they wanted me to go find another bank, that doesn't sound likely, but I think when they said our reputation, I think that was 100% what it was about, so that they could make a stand about and eventually clean house and say, we don't support this kind of activity. So that's just a theory. I don't know anything about it. I've never asked anybody to close their accounts, cut up their credit cards, or do anything in particular. All I've asked is, if you believe this is an attack on our Second Amendment rights, you need to do something to fight this, because I don't want to be the one to look back in 15 years and say, man, I wish I would have done something about this when they've succeeded and we no longer have our Second Amendment rights. So I'm asking everybody to do whatever it is they need to do to fight the battle against anyone trying to usurp our Second Amendment rights. And a lot of people have chosen to close their accounts and to find another bank and to cut up their credit cards. And that's fine. As individuals, if that's what they want, I support them in that. But I've never called for that. This is not a boycott. I have no vendetta against Bank of America. I just thought it was important for people who love firearms and who love the Constitution and who love the United States of America to know that stuff like this is actually happening out there.
Right. I think this is very important because, as you mentioned before, Freedom Group, which people who have been paying attention to this company know, they've been on a huge buying binge, an acquisition binge, and they've been buying a lot of companies. And I think they might be the biggest firearms company in the United States. Is that right?
Well, Remington absolutely is the largest manufacturer of firearms in the free world. And so when that is their focal company, and then everything else that was purchased was to support other parts of the industry that they didn't have as strong a contact in. So DPMS and Bushmaster both manufacture semi-automatic AR-15 type rifles so that they have that kind of market sewed up. I'm not sure which of their choices were for pistols, but they have a couple of other companies. I do know that they're closing Marlin. They bought Marlin and then closed it. They closed several other companies that they originally bought. I think they were either looking to clear some of the competition or hoping that they would add something, and then when they actually got them under their umbrella, found out that they couldn't carry their own weight, so they just eliminated them. But there are a number of theories out there about who the Freedom Group is and what their real intents are. I have no idea. You know, it kind of sounded like a good idea in 2008 and 2009 when all of this acquisition was taking place. The firearms manufacturing industry was booming, and especially some of the companies that they chose, because at that time when a Democrat was elected, there were a lot of people that assumed the first thing was going to happen is he was going to try to take our guns away from us, or at least our, quote, assault rifles, which, you know, we don't call them that. They're semi-automatic sporting rifles, and you can call it whatever you want, but it was thought that that was going to be one of the things that he was going to do. So everybody was buying up everything they could get their hands on just so they'd have them, assuming that they would be grandfathered in as having already owned them. I think that's why the industry had such a great boom. I think they named Obama the firearms industry #1 salesman for a couple of years since he's been in office.
So what you're saying is Freedom Group has a relationship with Bank of America?
Yes. Apparently, they claim that they did a $250 million deal with them.
Mm-hmm. They have that relationship. They have a relationship with the bigger arms manufacturers, probably across the globe, because they are one of the largest financial institutions on the planet. But they're picking on the little guy. So I think that what you're saying probably makes sense, your theory and other people's theory about this, because what else could it be? There really isn't any other logical explanation. It could be on the local level, like you said, with Fox's boss, or it could be something bigger. I think a lot of people are thinking it's coming down from democratically controlled Washington. Even Fast and Furious, a lot of people believe that. I think that originated in your town, Phoenix, right?
Absolutely. We've been kind of close to that, though we weren't involved in it directly. We know some of the people who were, and we have a really good relationship with our ATF office because we view them as a partner in helping us make sure that we follow the letter of the law in every transaction we do. Now, some people look at them as the adversary just because they're a government entity, but the fact of the matter is that the McMillan family and the McMillan family of businesses has been providing a good living for as many as 75 people since 1973. And we've done it all with the blessing of the ATF and with their help in any way every time we needed it. So I have no idea what the true story behind Fast and Furious is. I have my theories, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk about it. I know that there are movie stars and music stars who think that anytime they get in front of a microphone, they have the right to talk about politics, and that's not what this is about as far as I'm concerned in Democrat-Republican sense, but it's all about the Constitution, Second Amendment rights, and how we need to take a stand and fight for the right to bear and keep arms, because most of us feel like if they actually get the Second Amendment rights taken away, that's just the first step. All of the rest of it's easy.
Right. That's what former sheriff of Stafford County, Arizona, Richard Mack, says all the time, that when the second goes, then everything else goes. I don't know if you're familiar with Sheriff Mack.
Absolutely.
Okay. You're almost done cleaning your accounts out. Did it affect your business at all?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, we've had literally thousands of people contact us showing support. I want to thank everybody for that. A lot of people talked about, well, yeah, we'll support McMillan. I flat told them, you don't have to feel like you have to buy a product from me just to show support. All you need to do is take a stand for your Second Amendment rights, and you've done everything I need you to do. As far as our business goes, we didn't skip a beat. It was more of a hassle than anything else. It didn't cost us financially, and I'm quite sure it didn't really help us financially. There were some out there that said this was all just a ruse for McMillan to get the publicity, and if anybody knew me or this company and has been a part of our doing business for almost 40 years, they know that's not true. That's not the way we personally conduct our lives, and I say we because this is a family business, has been since 1973. My wife works with me, my son works with me, all three of my kids have worked with me during their lifetime. My brother worked with me, so it truly is a family business, and the one thing that we've maintained from day one is our company's based on honesty and integrity, and everything we do is centered around that.
September 1st comes and goes. Is this over? Is it done?
Well, I don't think so. I still keep getting letters, emails on a daily basis from people who are just seeing this, having had it passed to them via the email, internet jungle out there, and it's still circulating. I have tried from day one to personally take every phone call I can and to personally respond to every email I get, because if the people are willing to take the time to call and verify this with me, because I was in the meeting, I feel like it's important for me to respond to them. And I've tried very hard to make sure that I've talked to everyone who wanted to verify it directly with me. So that's part of why I think it's important that if you're going to have Bank of America's point of view, it needs to come directly from Ray Fox and not from anyone else in the corporate office. And that's just not happening.
You're talking about people from all over the United States that are contacting you, right?
Absolutely. And all over the world, really. We've had a big outcry from the people in Canada. And as you said, Bank of America is all over the world. And we have gotten support from literally all over the world. Australia, Canada, a number of European countries who have seen this through the Facebook and email and just wanted to call in or write in and say, hey, we support what you're doing. Thanks.
That's great. It kind of gives you hope that you're not all alone out there, that there are people that are like-minded and would do anything to support the Second Amendment.
Absolutely, even if it's not happening in their country.
Exactly. So September 1st, everything's going to be closed out, and you said you got a new local bank that's part of the Zion Group.
We did. We actually chose National Bank of Arizona, which is a great local bank. They've got several offices here in Phoenix, and one of the things that was a criteria for us was convenience, and one of the branches is less than 3 miles away. They actually brought their staff to our business and introduced us to everybody that we would be dealing with. We talked about being able to carry in the branch, and they say they have no policy against it. They would invite us to come in and meet everybody, so when they see us, if we happen to be carrying at the time, they will know who we are and why we're carrying, and so it won't alarm their employees, which I think is a great way to do that. Everything that they've done for us and shown us so far shows that they really, really want our business and that they really support the Second Amendment rights for all Americans.
Kelly, if any of the listeners want to contact you or take a look at your business, is there a website they can go to?
There is. Our website is McMillanUSA.com. It has a terrific online catalog. It gives everybody an opportunity to see what we do both in the fiberglass stock business as well as the rifle company. And it has all of our contact information information. If anyone wants to contact me directly, they can use the link to hunting rifles at McMillanUSA.com, and those are directed straight into my inbox. So I invite everybody to take a look out there, see what we do, and if there's anything that we can help him with, we'd be more than happy.
Kelly McMillan, the Director of Operations for the McMillan Group, I want to thank you so much for the time you spent explaining all this to the listeners, and thank you for standing up against this big corporation, and thank you for being interested in all of the people who have been contacting you from across the United States and the world.
Well, I welcome it. I want everybody who has a voice to be able to say, we agree with you, our Second Amendment rights are very important, and we will not allow anything that's going to come between us and our ability to keep and bear arms. Dave, I want to thank you for having me on. It's always important for me to be able to talk about this message because I think it's very important, and I hope your listeners feel the same way that we do.